So we are back for another edition of the SBK betting podcast, and what a weekend we have in store. The inaugural running of the SBK Clarence House Chase. And unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple of weeks, you will know that we've been waiting and hoping that there would be the clash that we've honestly been waiting for since last March. We were deprived of it when Energumene was unable to get to Cheltenham for the Arkle, but now it's on. Shishkin versus Energumene, and what is going to be a showstopper of a race. And James Millman, Ross Millar and Tom Collins all alongside me to take us through this, and three other key races from a brilliant day at Ascot on Saturday. So hi to the guys, and we'll get straight into the three races ahead of our big deep dive into the Clarence House, as there's some good punting races alongside for what looks to be a nice Saturday. So Ross, Tom and James will kick off with the 145, the SBK Holloway's handicap hurdle. A really good roll call in the past for this race, including Craig Nish, who went on to run a blinder in second in the Coral Cup last year, and subsequent long distance hurdle winner Thomas Darby the year before. What I thought was interesting about this race is we've seen some good price winners of this in the past. Gary Claremont heads the betting at 9-2, only £1 he's up from his good run in a handicap at this track behind Tritonic over Christmas. Stella Magic's 5-1, Unexpected Party 6-1, Fielder Doree, a new recruit for Nikki Henderson, is 8th with Smurfy Enki and Cateson, and it's 9-1, Bigger the Rest. I will head to James Millman first and have a chat about this race, as I thought, looking back on years gone by, this has been a race where some sort of more unexposed handicappers, maybe having their first run in more open grade, have sort of come to their own, specifically at this kind of time of the year where they've had a couple of races under their belt. And I thought this was filled with some horses that perhaps could give a horse like Gary Claremont, who's had a couple of years now in this sphere, a bit of a run for their money.
Yeah, definitely. Gary Claremont has arguably running in stronger races at Ascot as well. Cracking third behind Tritonic, off a mark of 142. He's up another pound. He's actually £13 higher than his Weatherby win back in May. So he's probably at the kind of limit of his potential. Whereas, as you mentioned, there's a few novices coming in here. And I like one in particular, Stella Magic, who was unbeaten in his first three starts. He won his Irish point to point nicely in February. Last winter, he won a couple of races around Taunton, beat Alaphilippe quite impressively and a strong novice in January. And there was something amiss when he tried to carry the double penalty. Good return at Haydock. He was very well backed in and run up to that contest behind Up for Parole, who I didn't think ran badly in Lanzarote. He was held up at the back of the field where not many made much progress. He has gone up £4, but he looks like a nice, slightly raced, progressive type. And I think he's won the Hobbs like long term as well. So for me, you mentioned that kind of progressive profile, and that's what Stella Magic's got, and that's where I'm ending up for his first run at Ascot.
5-1 with Michael Nolan on board, and he's gone up a few pounds for that good run last time out, but he's still sort of in between that sort of mid 130s mark, which is sort of the sweet spot for a race like this. Ross, I'll come to you next in terms of what James has said there about those horses and what I've mentioned about horses coming into their sort of prime now after a few runs under their belt, perhaps having their first few goes in this kind of grade. Is there a horse like that, like Stella Magic, or perhaps it even is Stella Magic that you're looking to for this?
Yeah, I came down on Smurfy Enki, who I think is progressive, and unlike a lot in this field, and Stella Magic including that, a lot of them are creeping up the weights without winning. Cateson, Gary Claremont, Stella Magic, they're all getting up in the weights without actually winning. Smurfy Enki raced off 127 here, which is the same mark he was second off at Fontwell, and that was potentially a slightly disappointing result. But I do wonder whether, given his time again, whether Jamie Moore might have been a bit more patient. He was quite forceful, quite aggressive, and then got run down quite late on by a fairly unexposed horse of Tom Simmons, History Bell. So I thought 127 up in trip, I think will suit him well. And he's still very well handicapped off the back of a couple of novice hurdle runs, 2 wins at Plumpton last year, mark of 127. I think he's better than that. And I think he's a nice price at 8-1.
Tom Cannon also back on board, a winning partner. I know that Chris Gordon likes to use the services of Jamie Moore when he can, but that's nice to have Tom Cannon back on board as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a criticism of Jamie. I just think the way the race panned out, he thought he had it to go and win, and actually something came out of the pack and got to him late. Tom Cannon's won on this horse before, rides plenty of times for Chris Gordon, so he's certainly a positive booking.
He's 8-1, and there's not much separating a lot of these horses in the betting. 9-2 the field. Tom, I'll come to you next. We've heard a word for Smurfy Yankee and for Stella Magic. I'm going to actually go quite left of centre and disregard everything I've said about horses that usually are like going into this race, because Esprit du Large is a horse that I thought put in his best performance since the Henry VIII novice chase win all those years ago when he was second at Exeter last time. He doesn't really, as I say, have the profile you'd want in a race like this, but I just think they might be getting him back to where he was at his very best, and he's 13-1. Is that a mad thought, or what have you thought about this race?
No, it's not a mad thought. I just preferred the more unexposed types in here. And this could be a podcast first, but I've looked at this race exactly the same as Ross Millar. I don't think that's ever happened before. But I'm also with Smurfy Yankee here for Chris Gordon and Tom Cannon. I emulate everything Ross has said. I completely agree with his argument. The fact that Gary Claremont's gone up in the weights, unexpected party, gone up in the weights to make them not a bet for me. Smurfy Yankee was considered a really talented novice hurdler last year. He was a really good bumper horse, actually. He wasn't beaten too far behind Iron Maximus and My Drogo in a Cheltenham bumper. And a mark of 127 looks perfectly fair. Around 9-1 with SBK is a good price.
Well, there's always a first for everything. We like a bit of that. Two shrewd judges. And by the great Blue Brazil, the sire of the great Constitution Hill. And look, he's going from strength to strength. So Smurfy Yankee coming into this of what could be quite a nice mark of 127. But for James at Stella Magic, for me, Esprit du Large, it's a proper good each way bet for a bit of Esprit du Large. And we'll head into the next race. We're gonna feature the 220, the SBK Mares Hurdle, won in a romp by Roxana last year, and there is one mare that returns to Mares Only Company following a bit of a short break, and one that I feel warrants much respect, and I just believe probably should be put shorter than the price of 9-4 currently, and that's Molly Ollie's Wishes, who heads the betting alongside Western Victories. They're joint favourites at 9-4. My sister Sarah 3-1. Anything for Love is 8s. White Hot Chili Philly 13-1, and Impressive Lady completes it at 17-1. James, I'll come back to you. As I've said, Molly Ollie's Wishes didn't really look like it was her true running when she ran in the Coral Hurdle last time. I think you could put a line through that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, she was a little bit disappointing, but I like your point in the intro. She's back against the mares. Her last 4 runs against the mares, she's won 4 of those contests and was impressive at Weatherby on her return, beating Miranda by 5 lengths. So I kind of look at this race as an angle. Western Victory, I wanted to oppose purely because she's a mare that's moved yards effectively mid-season. No disrespect to Emma Lavell's team, but I think a mare might just take a little bit longer to adapt to new surroundings. And Declan Quealy, who trained and actually rode her quite a bit over in Ireland, he knew her exceptionally well, and I just felt she could be vulnerable as one that's pretty strong in the market. So Molly's Last Wish is the obvious one to go with. Yeah, she never really went much zest against Buzz, but when they take on the Geldings, some of these mares do struggle and they kind of dominate their own sex a little bit more. So I'm with her. My sister Sarah would be the main danger for me, as the other 3 UK mares, they've got a fair bit to find. So small field, tight contests, but I think the Skeletons will try and get back-to-back wins in this race.
Yeah, they went quite a good gallop set by Song for Someone in the Coral Hurdle, and it was over 2 miles, 3.5 furlongs. She's now back up in distance, which will suit her. Tom, I'll come to you next. Like they've obviously played around a little bit with her trip, but this looks like her optimum distance. Really, just a really good opportunity, and we've seen some classy mares win this race and really show their authority in races like this in the past.
Yeah, exactly. I think this has probably been the plan for quite a while for Molly's Ollie's Wishes. She's obviously unbeaten in the last 4 runs in mares only races, which is a clear positive. And much like James, I don't really like the chance of Western Victory. I think she's far too short in the market. It's hard to compare the Irish and the UK mares' form, but I prefer Molly Ollie's Wishes anyway. The fact she was taking on Buzz and then she took on the likes of Brewing Up a Storm in the National Spirit just shows the regard that Dan and Harry Skelton obviously hold her in. And in December 2020, she proved that a flat right-handed track over 3 miles, perfect for her. She beat Impressive Lady that day. She reopposes here. I can't see that form being turned around. So Molly Ollie's Wishes, who surprising to me wasn't favourite in the anti-post markets, and it's surely going to go off favourite, is the play in this race.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think 9-4 as we speak is a bit of a gift for Ollie's wishes. But Ross, I know you like taking on favourites. I know you like trying to find a bit of value in there. Could you find it in what is quite a trappy little contest?
Yeah, I mean, I fully respect Ollie's wishes, but I'm not a big fan of horses jumping up hugely in trip or dropping down hugely in trip for that matter. And she was keen enough in both her runs this year, 2 miles at Wetherby and then 2 mile 3 last time. She's going to need to settle better than that to see out the 3 miles, given that My Sister Sarah will give her a stern test. I was quite taken with her win at Kempton on a penultimate start. She looked in a spot of bother turning in and then very quickly put the race to bed and was a wide margin winner. I don't think the drop back to 2.5 miles at Leopardstown suited her, and she was beaten a good distance. But the 3 that filled the first 3 spots, Royal Kahala, Heaven Help Us, and Tell Me Something Girl, are right to the front of the mares hurdle betting for Cheltenham. So it was a significantly deeper race than this is. I think history has shown us that generally the Irish mares have more strength in depth, and I thought she would give Ollie's wishes plenty to do, particularly if the Dan Skelton horse is keen in the early stages and doesn't leave itself an awful lot of petrol left for the closing stages.
Yeah, interesting. Obviously, My Sister Sarah is joining another Willie Mullins recruit that's coming over, and like they've seen the opportunity, you may as well bring them over in the lorry at the same time. So that it's clearly worked before with her. She's come over and won at Kempton well. And as you say, I thought the run at Leopardstown was slightly disappointing, but if you do look through that race as it's stacked up, there could be a bit more substance in that. Western Victory, it's an interesting move to Emma Lavelle. What do you think about James's comments about moving horses at this point of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know the Declan Queally yard all that well, but I would know that it would be a significantly smaller operation than Emma Lavelle's yard. And having mares at home myself, yeah, you know, changing weather, flowers sprouting, you name it, they notice it, and they do just take a little bit more settling and managing than in general the boys do. So for exactly the same reason as James and Tom, that's why I overlooked her.
Yeah, it's a curious case of these mares. Sometimes they can throw in the towel if they want to. Sometimes they can be electric. And that's what Roxana was this time last year. And I think that they're trying to find a nice replacement for her, the Skeltons, and Ollie's wishes. Well, James, Tom and I believe will be able to prove that come 2:20 on Saturday. But My Sister Sarah for Ross in one of the smaller fields of the day, but still good race to look forward to ahead on Saturday. The most competitive race from a betting perspective at Ascot on Saturday is the Handicap Chase over 2 miles 5 furlongs at 2:55. 5 of the 8 runners come into this off the back of a win, not least Palmer's Hill, who has thrived back over fences this season. This has been a really, really good race, a good handicap in the past. Dasher won this off 11 stone 10 last year, Surname in 2019 off a big weight too. And, based on that, it's unsurprising that it's, from a betting perspective, quite a tricky one to pick out. Palmer's Hill 11-4, Fanny and Dresdeval 11-2, Phoenix Way is 7-1. We've got Killer Clown at 6-1, Golden Whiskey 9-1, Night and Dubai 8-1, and Larry is 15-1. James, I'll come to you first, and we'll just discuss my thoughts on this race, having a look at the last winners and what they've done off huge weights. No mean feat, difficult to do round Ascot as well. Would that put you off Fanny and Destreval, who comes into this race off the back of a very good victory, and Lucy Turner, importantly, taking £7 off his back, a big moment for her?
Yeah, it's a big ride for Lucy, but a theme that I've often explored on the podcast is picking horses that are going to be overpriced due to their rider and punters' perceived bias against said rider. And we had a nice win with Dolphin Square at Cheltenham with David Maxwell on board, and Lucy Turner, another £7 claim, an amateur, She rides very, very well. Venetia gives her a lot of chances, and she generally takes those chances with both hands. She had a cracking Christmas period. I think she had 4 rides and 3 winners and a second. She's rides a lot over fences to Venetia. She's 8 from 52 over fences. And the horse itself, I thought was really impressive when he won at Newbury. Back into an easier handicap, having contested open graded contests he ran in the Clarence House last year, and he got beaten 9 lengths by First Flow, which is a good effort when probably 2 miles is on the sharp side for him nowadays. That 2.5 mile trip, so ran well in the old roan behind Old Mankind, only beaten 4 lengths, and then he was very impressive. Could have won much further at Newbury last time. Charlie's obviously at Haydock anyway, riding Royal Guy, and Lucy takes off £7, so that does take him down to 11.5. I just think you're going to get a bigger price purely because Lucy's riding them, and I don't think that's a negative at all. She's very good over a fence. Fanny Deschavelle likes not to be fiddled with. He likes to have it all his own way. He's got a very economical style, a little bit low over his fences, but if Lucy sits quiet on him, I think the £7 claim will be a big positive, and you're going to get a nice price about him.
Yeah, 5-1. He's one of those horses that took him 2 years to win a race following his first race for Venetia. Would that worry you, or do you think he's just couldn't really hold his own in the top class, and that this is more realistic despite that big weight he's got to lump around?
Well, he's 2 from 4 in handicaps. He was second to Magic Saint on his comeback last season at Cheltenham. He isn't quite open class when he's off level weights. I think he's shown he can carry big weights. He carried 11-12 when he won at Newbury. He just comes up short at the top level, and he often runs with credit. Like I say, that Clarence House form was good. I don't think he's been losing because he's been throwing away opportunities he should have won. He just hasn't arguably been good enough, and he's one of those kind of moonlight horses, but Venetia's kind of found the right races. And I didn't think this was overly competitive, bearing in mind the prize money. So I think Venetia's found it a cracking race for him.
Yeah, I think it's pretty admirable that she would throw him into a race like this. He's a decent enough price. I think he's about 20-1 at the moment for the Ryanair. So he's clearly got, plenty of ability, plenty of potential. Tom, I'll come to you next. As based on what James was saying, jockeys wise, Lucy hasn't ridden Fanny Deschavelle yet. He's possibly, I'd imagine, done a lot with him at home. Does that kind of thing put you on? £7 coming off his back is a big positive, but again, John Joe Neal Jr. on the likes of Palmer's Hill, it's no mean feat.
Yeah, well, the fact that he's got 11 stone 12 and he would have to give upwards of £13 to the rest of his rivals if a full professional jockey was on board. I think the £7 claim here for Lucy Turner is a huge tick in the box of Fanny Deschavelle. I'm in the same camp as James. I think he's going to win this race. Arguably, his Newbury victory in Handicap Company last time out was the best performance we've seen in a Handicap Chase this year. It earned him an RPR of 164. Now, that's the same as Fiddler on the Roof, who finished second in the Ladbrokes Trophy, got obviously beaten by Cloudy Glen, but he was carrying a lower weight, so his RPR wasn't as high. Prior to that, his 4th in the Old Roan Chase was really eye-catching. He flew home. He was out the back of the TV for much of the way. And as they crossed the line, he wasn't beaten too far at all. Real eye-catcher. I think he's just a class in this race. Venetia Williams has a 57% strike rate with her chases at Ascot this season, 4 from 7, which is a big tick in the box. She seems to run her best chases at Ascot. And also, as James said, he finished 4th in the Clarence House last year. To run in the Clarence House and now running a Handicap Chase is a big difference. I think he's a class of the race and will win. 11-2 is a great price.
And Ascot, as you mentioned, has been a good track to Venetia. It's a slightly different test, obviously, to Newbury, where he seems to really excel. And Venetia has made no bones about that either. So you look at that run in the Clarence House, even though he was 4th, beaten a good few lengths by First Flow, enough to suggest that he at least handles the track. Yeah,
definitely. He 100% handled the track that day. They went really hard in the Clarence House last year, and First Flow kind of won the race a fair way out. Fanny Deschavelle, who's not at his best over 2 miles, as James said, was staying on well in the closing stages. A couple more strides, he may have even got up for 3rd or 2nd. So that was a really eye-catching effort. He seemed to handle Ascot very nicely. I wouldn't be saying that there's a big difference between Newbury and Ascot as to which he prefers. Hopefully, he'll prove that he handles Ascot even better than Newbury on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. James and Tom have kind of tweaked my thinking when coming into this. I was just finding Deschavelle, taking him a good few years to get that win again, and and he's now been massively penalised. Lucy, it's a big moment for her. I like to hope that she has a great race ride on this horse. But I thought it was pretty competitive. I thought it was a good race, and I like Palmer's Hill coming into this off the back of his 2 good wins, and obviously he's got a better weight in his favour. Ross, listening to what the guys said about Fanny and Destraval, clearly the class horse in the race. You like to take on favourites. Are you in their camp as well?
I'm not, but they made a very compelling argument, didn't they? They're making me think again. I take on board all they say. I entirely agree. Lucy Turner is very, very good value for £7. I just have the opinion that Fanny Destraval is I wouldn't say a complicated horse, but I think he takes a bit of knowing. Like, he can run in snatches, he can jump a little bit out to his right, he can fiddle one. And I think if you're going to pick a jockey to suit that horse in the weighing room at the moment, it's Charlie Deutsch every time. We've said it a couple of times on the podcast. He's phenomenal over fences and getting better this season. So she has got big boots to fill. Just from that point of view, the £7 claim, she's great value for it. And I take on board that Tom said he got a very good figure last time at Newbury, but he beat Colorado Doc, who's a 3-miler, and thoroughly exposed, admittedly in easy fashion. And so for those 2 reasons, I wanted to look elsewhere. I'm wondering whether I'm being a bit foolish now, but I really like Palmer's Hill. I was very impressed with his win at Ascot last time, having been entirely against him when we previewed that race. He travelled very well. Crucially, his jumping was much, much slicker last time than it had been at any point over fences up until then. And his last furlong was very impressive. You couldn't have said he was going to be a certain winner going to 2 out, but going to 1 out, it was a case of how far he was going to win. So this extra 2 furlongs here, I think, can help him offset this £8 rise. And I was quite sweet on him against the boys' choice, but they did sound very compelling.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on all those points, because I was the same as you. I thought Palmer's Hill really surprised me at Ascot last time, where I'd gone against him, and he looked like he was, there were moments of worry, but he actually got it together in the end quite well. And I just like the partnership. I think brings out the best in John Joe O'Neill Jr. as well. At 11-4, he's a lot skinnier than Fanny Destraval at 11-2. I think it's going to be a really fascinating race. The class might come forward, but Palmer's Hill is just that little bit more unexposed. And I just think it's going to be a good race. So we'll see how this pans out for both Ross and I and Tom and James ahead of the feature, the showstopper. Guys, the SBK Clarence House Chase over 2 miles. This is what we're going to have a really good look at now at 3:35. And before we get going, SBK will be best price on the Clarence House Chase. So very important to note. And at the moment, Shishkin is the 8-11 favourite. Energumene is 2-1. First Flow, last year's winner, is 12-1, and Amula Gold is 100-1, which just reflects on what we've essentially, from a betting perspective, have a 2-horse race in many senses. Look, the media, everyone's made no bones about what a clash that this is, and it's brilliant for the sport that we've got these 2 horses, one at his best over in Ireland, in Energumene, his biggest test, and Shishkin, who has really shown all of racing what he's about at Cheltenham at the festival twice now, and he is currently unbeaten over fences in the same sense that Energumene is. But is it that straightforward? Is it the case that Shishkin has just done the more, and Energumene has got more has to prove himself to be at his real best, and that's what the betting is suggesting. I see that Shishkin comes into this with much more than Energumene has proved so far. But I am massively respectful of Willie Mullins to bring this horse over here. And I don't think he brings anything over. He's done it with Indeso, with similarities and such with this horse, both being by Denman Red. And look, it's set to be a cracker. I'll go off to Ross, to you first, and get your thoughts on this race, because as I've mentioned, a race that we should be really, really pleased and proud to have running, because this is what it's all about, having the best of Ireland and England coming on our racetracks, not just for Cheltenham.
Yeah, it's a real treat, and it's something the sport desperately needs, these big horses to take each other on away from 4 days in March, which we love, the 4 days in March, but the season's about more than that for me. So first and foremost, let's hope whatever happens, they both come out of the race well, and crucially, both run to their level next time. Nicky Henderson was certainly damaged by the Altior surname race, where he certainly felt neither horse was the same afterwards. So let's hope we don't get a repeat of that, and that might just encourage the tide to change and people to take horses on throughout the season. I'd certainly in the Shishkin camp, I think he's a super horse, but I'm quite surprised to see the disparity in the market, 8 to 11, 2 to 1. I don't see it as cut and dried as that. Captain Guinness is the only horse you can really use as any sort of form line. He was 8 lengths behind Energumene at Naas, and he was 13 lengths behind Shishkin at Cheltenham in the Arkle. But he was galloped to a walk by Energumene at Punchestown. But that's at the end of the season, a long, hard season. You couldn't take that at face value. Tactically, I think it's going to be interesting. Energumene will probably make the running. You would think David Bass will try and repeat what he did last year on first flow and sort of engage Energumene going down the back. And then it's a case of how much rope Nico de Boinville is prepared to give them. He's not going to want to get involved, but at the same time, he's dealing with 2 very high-class horses. He's not going to want to give them an awful lot of distance. So it's going to be a fascinating race to watch. Certainly not a race I'll be betting, and I'll be having a cup of tea and a slice of cake and watching it over and over again. But if I had to make a selection as to who I think will win, I think Shishkin is probably the best of 2 very, very good horses.
And of interest, do you think that's based on, obviously we've said the form, it's very difficult to sort of find the form lines. Obviously Energumene has only had to beat what's put in front of him, whereas Shishkin's beat Grenadine and beat Grade 1 horses. So do you think it's just what Shishkin's achieved at this point has proven that? Or do you think from what you've seen and in Ireland and in England, he just looks visually to you the better horse?
Yeah, I think he's visually the better horse. He has been afforded more opportunity to run to a higher mark than Energumene has had so far. I just think softer ground would have perhaps helped Energumene. It's soft, good to soft in place with the dry forecast. He does maybe jump slightly out to his left, and Energumene is possibly better right-handed, given that he slightly jumps out to his right. But I just thought the Arkle win last year, when I sort of watched it back this week, it was brilliantly good. He picked them up and he went away from them, and it was a decent Arkle field, and he beat them very easily. So if we've got 2 horses as good as Shishkin, then we're in for a real treat. But I think Shishkin is probably just a very, very high-class horse.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I'll come to you next, Tom, because look, with Shishkin and Nicky Henderson, you've got a trainer that wears his heart on his sleeve. We hear a lot from him about, Willie Mullins, keep the boat at home, don't come over, all of this, will he, won't he? There's a lot of drama around Nicky, whereas Energumene, Willie Mullins, just the mysterious characters. You don't really know what's going on until the last minute. And with that, you don't really ever know how good their horses are. Dysart Dynamo from the weekend being one, they just go out and impress you every time they come out with not a huge amount of word from the yard. So have we seen the best from Energumene yet? Obviously, this is a big, big test. Do you think that Shishkin is proven himself enough, as Ross thinks, to just be too good, whatever the case?
Well, this is a race featuring 2 brilliant 2-mile chasers. It's the race we've all been waiting for. I can tell you there's been plenty of nervy times in the SBK offices over the last week and a half as we've been waiting for Nicky Henderson and Willie Mullins to both declare their horses and confirm that they're going to run. I had a bet on Shishkin last week at 15 to 8. I thought it was an incredible price. Obviously, this was when Nicky was saying he needs to go and work at the weekend and then we'll give him the green light. Now his odds on. I think the value's obviously gone, but he's the most likely winner. He's run to a mark of 170 or higher on 4 occasions, and Energumene's done it twice. Now, as you mentioned, Shishkin's running better races, therefore the chance of him running to a mark of 170 is higher than Energumene, but he has proven himself enough to me to suggest that he's a champion. And to beat a champion, you've got to be superb. And I don't think Energumene's just shown that yet. This race is also going to set up perfectly for Shishkin with first flow in the field as well. Energumene, when he's been running in Ireland, has been given easy leads out in front in much of his races. Now, yes, that's due to his high cruising speed. Other horses don't want to go with him in the early stages because they'll just bottom out and have nothing for for the sprint at the end. But at the same time, he's kind of just had it his own way, and it's been a piece of work most of his races. I think Shishkin this time will be able to sit just in behind Energumene and First Flow, who, as Kim Bailey has said on a couple of occasions, is an oddball and a freak of nature. And he hates watching his races. So it'll be interesting to see how the race pans out. But I'm sure Nico de Boinville will be in the perfect position and then pounce in the straight and prove that he is the best 2-mile chaser around.
Yeah, it was really good content that you guys created with Kim Bailey, seeing First Flow at home with plenty of headgear that they train him in. And they all have to be slightly nutty. They have to have that kind of freakish nature, and Energumene seems to be a bit like that. Shishkin in terms of the way he jumps, the way that he sort of lights up his electric turn of foot, it is slightly Altior-esque in a sense when he was in his heyday. James, from your perspective, what you've seen, and I think we've covered a lot in terms of what they've done, but as horses, the way that they jump, the way that they travel, do you think that there's too much disparity in the betting here? Do you think that they should be closer together, Shishkin and Energumene, or as both Ross and Tom have said, have we seen a real true champion who could turn into an even better horse in the shape of Shishkin, and Energumene will have to play second fiddle?
Well, the problem is with Energumene, we don't actually really know what he can achieve, because he's had 6 starts over obstacles, 5 of them over fences, and he's only had 1 horse ever get within 10 lengths, and that was Captain Guinness at Naas back in January on his second start over fences. And even then, he kind of burned him off pretty quickly, 2 out, and he disappeared. So we don't really know what he will find off the bridle in a battle, because we haven't seen it over obstacles. He actually got beaten his bumper at Navan on his debut back in November 19. So that's a concern. I think there's a risk with Energumene that when he gets headed, he could fold completely, because we don't know. Shishkin, he can look a bit lazy sometimes. He does come off a bridle, and a little bit like what Altior used to do. And then when he quickens, he just powers on through. So I think it'll be very interesting at halfway. I think Nicky will be delighted that First Flow was in the race, because David Bass was very aggressive on the horse last year, and that worked a treat. He won the 2.5, the Peterborough, so he stays exceptionally well. So unfortunately for Paul Townend and Willie Mullins, Energumene isn't going to be left alone in front, which would have been the risk if Shishkin had to be the one to take Energumene on. That could have been a little bit tricky. My negative, I suppose, for the big horse is Nicky wasn't happy with him. He didn't go to Tingle Creek. Then the scope was bad. He wasn't sure, was he going to go to Kempton for the Desert Orchid or not. Decided to just in a week to the race, and he was impressive. Now, if he's had a bit of a trouble preparation, there's always a chance this race could come a little bit too soon. The big positive is, I think if Nicky could have found an excuse not to run, he wouldn't have run. So I think he's going to be pretty happy. But just in that niggling doubt, if you can take a really short price, I think he's the one that most likely to win. The market's got it right. But your only niggling doubt is he has had a little bit of interrupted campaign, and would that catch him out if Energumene can find off the bridle? And it's going to be absolutely fascinating to find out what happens on Saturday. Great they're both taking part. Hopefully they both run the race, as Ross says. And then we've got perhaps a rematch at Cheltenham in a couple of months' time. But for SBK, they've certainly got the right 2 contenders in the main race. I'm sticking with Shishkin as your winner, but there will be questions answered, because we're going to know how good Energumene is, and that's going to be absolutely fascinating, because, like I say, nothing's got within 8 lengths the closest one ever got over fences. But Shishkin has actually had a couple of races at Aintree in particular at the end of the season. It did look a little bit doubtful entering the home straight, so we know he can find under pressure, and that's what we have no idea about Energumene. And probably Willie Mullins doesn't even know what's going to happen when he gets into a proper battle, and let's hope we get one on Saturday.
Yeah, we sure saw Shishkin in a proper battle with Abracadabra back in the Supreme Novice Hurdle. That was a fight, and he really knows how to when he wants to. I think he's pretty special, and as echo what all the guys have said about, brilliant to have this race. Let's hope that all horses are able to put in their best, come back fit and healthy, and then potentially another rematch with a lot of these come Champion Chase time in March. But that is the inaugural running of the SBK Clarence House Chase. It feels like we've got a full house for Shishkin, but Ross is probably most likely going to sit on the sidelines. I don't really believe it's much of a betting race myself either, but it's one that I do think Shishkin's going to show his true colours and give the British a little bit more to be hopeful for heading into the Cheltenham Festival in 2 months' time. So we've come to the end. We've had a good look at this Saturday's card at Ascot and a proper deep dive into the SBK Clarence House. For new customers, SBK will refund their first £50 in bets as cash, which is always important when we're thinking about a big betting day. So as ever, we'll go and head to each member of the team for their nap and their next bets. So we'll start with Tom Collins.
Yeah, so I'll get the next best out of the way early because we've talked about it already, which is Fanion Destravale in the 255 at Ascot. I think he'll carry the big weight to win. Now the nap is coming up Wolverhampton, so I'm going a bit outside of the box here, but I've got a busy day on Saturday, Jess. I'm at Ascot and then I'm hot footing it to Sky Sports Studios to cover Stateside and Wolves, hence the Wolverhampton nap. And the selection is Old Port in the 6:30 at Wolverhampton for David Evans, whose team are in flying form. Now this horse ran in sprint trips on its first 3 starts. He's by the Gurkha out of a mare that stayed a good trip. So he was always expected to improve once going over a mile or further. And when he entered handicap company last time, I thought he was a decent bet, but I didn't back him purely because I just wasn't sure if he was going to be 100% ready on just his 4th career start. He was squeezed out the start and I was thinking, thank God for that. I would have wasted my money. However, he flew home down the outside in the style of a horse that was extremely well handicapped. He's only gone up £5 in the weights. I think Old Port's going to win the 6:30 at Wolves. We don't have a price yet, but I think if he's around 4-1 or bigger, he's a very good bet.
Well, Old Port to get us out of trouble if everything goes wrong at Ascot on Saturday. So we love a bit of that on the podcast. So thanks for that, Tom. And Fanion Destravale, the next best, which has been a popular bet amongst others, including James, who I'd imagine is keen to keep him on side for naps as well.
Yeah, he's my nap the weekend because I like to go with jockeys that are perhaps a little bit unfashionable as regards to the wider betting public in particular. And Lucy Turner, she's impressed me this season. She's really come alive. Sudden Claim, absolute gold dust. I think Fanion Destravale, yes, he's a little bit tricky, but her quiet style will suit him. And I was impressed by what he did at Newbury. So that's the nap. And the next best, I'm going to go to Haydock for the opener, Papa Tango Charlie, who has looked a little bit expensive, but he's certainly turned the corner since going chasing. He's won both his starts at Carlisle. He's in an open novice chase, not the strongest of races to open Haydock's card. And I thought he was a type of improver. He's impressed me a good time when he won on chase debut. And he's my next best. But Lucy Turner, I'm hoping she comes good at Ascot.
So 11-2 for Fanion Destravale. Papa Tango Charlie is 11-8. Good card at Haydock. John Bond's up there as well. So worth keeping an eye on that card too. So thanks to James for his nap and next best, and to Ross for some of his selections as well.
So the nap, I've gone to Taunton for the 3:15, the Portman Cup. Jarle Enki won it last year despite 2 horrific jumping errors, the likes of which you've never seen. He was actually a fairly comfortable winner in the end. The conditions of the race mean he's very well suited by it. He has to give a bit of weight away, but nowhere near as much as he would if it was a handicap. 3 mile 5 suits him very well. I think he'll take all the beating again this year. And then my next best is Smurfy Enki in the 145. I thought he's very well handicapped off 127. He's a progressive horse, not climbing the weights, unlike a lot he's against. And I think he can get the job done at 8-1.
Brilliant. And we've got Jarle Enki at even money for Bryony Frost back on board for the Portman Cup. So that's a good look at everyone's naps and next best. For me, Haydock is, as I was mentioning, a really good card. And we're discussing Lucy Turner, who's on board Fanion Destravale, because not just for her weight, but Charlie Deutsch, regular rider, is on Royal Pagaille, who returns for the Peter Marsh Handicap Chase at Haydock on Saturday. And he won this race last year. He's a lot higher in the handicap. I think it's about £7 higher this year, but I think he's as good as ever, and he's a lot better than this. And again, admirable that he's in here off top weight. He's 3-1. It might have a bit of an impact on his Gold Cup price if he does go and win that. But let's hope that they've got him back to his best, because he had another little niggling issue after the Betfair Chase, who's come here off the back of a break. And my next best will be Palmer's Hill, who I think represents a very good chance at Ascot for the John Joe O'Neill team. So that is it. For anyone attending Ascot, make sure to visit the SBK activation area, where you will find our very own Tom Collins. He will be on hand to provide tips, have a chat, have a catch up. He's there with his beaming smile. So don't miss him. And there will be chances to win prizes at Blake's Pad on the ground floor of the grandstand. Set to be an epic day. Very envious of everyone that's there. I will be working, unfortunately, so can't be at Ascot, but I hope everyone can enjoy it, and a race to savour, a race for the ages. So best of luck to everyone with their selections over the weekend. Make sure that you like, subscribe. Hopefully we'll all be back next week to review what we saw on Saturday, and let's hope that we have a great day of action. So thanks to everyone, as always, for joining us for another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast.